If you're looking for an all-electric estate, there aren't that many options, but BMW are trying to bridge the gap between the affordable, like the MG5 EV and the Peugeot E308 SW, and the luxurious, such as the Porsche Taycan Cross Turismo or Sports Turismo. There is also the Audi A6 Avant or the S6 Avant, but that will hopefully be covered at a later date. Now, at the time of filming and in the UK, the i5 Touring starts from £70,000. That is for the eDrive 40 Sports Edition model, but if you want the M Sports model, that will cost over £76,000. The M Sport Pro will set you back over £78,000, while the M60 xDrive costs a whopping £100,000 without even adding any additional options. So in this review, you're going to see if it's actually worth its price tag, and of course how it compares to some of its key competitors. So to kick things off, let's talk about its performance. And here, the eDrive 40 models have got a singular motor that's planted on the rear axle, and thus giving it a rear-wheel drive configuration. Combined with the 81.2 kilowatt-hour battery pack, they output 250 kilowatts of power, or 340 horsepower, and 400 newton meters of torque. They are claimed to go from 0 to 62 miles an hour in 6.1 seconds, and have a top speed of 120 miles an hour. Now, the M60 xDrive, however, has got two electric motors, one at the front and one at the back, and therefore giving you an all-wheel drive configuration instead. It outputs a staggering 442 kilowatts of power, or 601 horsepower, and 795 newton meters of torque. It's claimed to go from 0 to 62 miles an hour in 3.9 seconds and has a top speed of 143 miles an hour. Now, I had the eDrive 40 M Sport Pro tested using RaceLogic's Performance Box Touch from 0 to 20 miles an hour in 1.72 seconds, 0 to 30 miles an hour in 2.59 seconds, 0 to 60 miles an hour in 5.59 seconds, and then 50 to 70 miles an hour in 2.56 seconds. I also clocked in a peak acceleration of 0.55 G. Now, it is worth mentioning that these times were achieved with launch control enabled, which is very easy to initiate. You put your foot down on the brake pedal, put your foot down on the accelerator pedal, then you get some rumbling that goes throughout the cabin and a notification via the instrument cluster that launch control is active, and then you simply lift off the brake pedal and you propel yourself forwards in a pretty rapid fashion. Now, there is also boost mode, a small little flappy paddle that is found on the left side of the steering wheel, which effectively gives you the full whack of power at any given point, no matter which drive mode you're in. This is quite handy, for example, if you're on one of the more efficiency modes, and if you do want that extra bit of speed, for example, if you want to do an overtaking maneuver, well, you simply initiate boost mode, which will give you that full amount of power for roughly 10 seconds. Now, its straight line speed is certainly impressive, although some people will argue that the eDrive 40 model is a little lackluster, specifically for a vehicle of its price point. Nonetheless, I do think a lot of consumers will be very much happy when they put their foot down on the accelerator pedal. Now, what will be potentially of even more importance and, of course, interest to those people who are looking to get a BMW are the overall handling characteristics. And here, the i5 Touring certainly doesn't disappoint. You've got a really responsive driver's input with the steering wheel, and you feel really planted on the ground with a minimal amount of body roll. It's not quite Porsche Taycan levels, and therefore won't give you the utmost sense of connection, at least for a fully electric vehicle, but for other alternatives out there on the market, the i5 Touring gives you that good sort of middle ground. There are also fantastic brakes, and while the specifications of only 4-piston ventilated setup at the front and single piston at the rear doesn't exactly scream the utmost confidence, when it does actually come to using it in practice, the vehicle does actually decelerate really rapidly and gives you, therefore, plenty of confidence in an emergency situation, or of course if you're just going to be hooning it around on winding country routes. Now, the biggest standout selling point for me is its suspension system, which I do think is an absolute work of art. This is something I've commended BMW in the past with the likes of the regular i5 or, for example, the i4, but it was really nice to experience it yet again in the i5 Touring. At the front, you've got a double wishbone axle setup, while at the rear, you've got a 5-link axle with air suspension with automatic self-leveling. The combination means that when you're going around winding country routes, it doesn't suffer from too much body roll and doesn't seesaw from left and right. And while you're going around and pottering around town, it soaks up all the anomalies, the speed bumps and the potholes, all while leaving you with an absolute smile on your face while you're getting that sort of responsive driver's input. Truly, over here, I do think it's arguably its key selling point. Now, it's worth mentioning over here that the M Sport models have got a load suspension by 8mm, while the M60 goes even further with an extra 5mm that's been lowered on top of that. And the reason behind that is because the M60 models, as standard, have got the Adaptive Suspension Professional package. This is available for an extra £2,400 on the eDrive 40 M Sport models, thus not the entry-level Sports Edition, and this will give you improved driving dynamics, steering precision, adjustable profiles, and more importantly, electronically controlled shock absorbers. Now, if you do want an extra step on top of that, you'll have to go for the M60 model, because for an additional £4,000, you can go for the M Adaptive Suspension Pro, and this ups the ante by giving you shorter turning circle, active roll stabilization, among a few other goodies. And this might be something that you might want to get if you're going to be really going around track quite regularly. But in this respect, as I've hopefully highlighted already, even the standard configuration that what you find on the eDrive 40 is more than enough. The M60 model with its even more advanced suspension setup is actually going to be an absolute work of art. So what about when it comes to its electric range? Well, as standard across the entire trim range, you have got an 81.2 kilowatt-hour battery pack and a heat pump that comes included as standard. The latter being appreciated because it's a lot more efficient on those colder climate days. Now, that's to be expected given the overall price point of the i5 Touring, but nonetheless, it's good that the manufacturer has included it. Now, when it comes to the WLTP range claims, the manufacturer says that the eDrive 40 model will net between 326 to 340 miles, while the M60 model moves down to 280 to 310 miles. Now, from my own mixed driving test in the eDrive M Sport Pro, I netted 225 to 245 miles. Now, that's actually not too bad in the grand scheme of things, but is a little bit disheartening given the overall price point of the vehicle, and of course if you compare and contrast it with some of its competitors, namely those that are of course smaller or indeed larger size SUVs. The i5 Touring doesn't exactly stand out, and given this was the eDrive 40, you should expect even lower range if you're going to be driving the M60. Now, when it comes to being as efficient as possible and for you to recoup energy back into the battery pack, you want to enable a degree of regenerative braking. And right now I'm in B mode, and if I were to lift off the accelerator pedal, I will come to a complete standstill, which is certainly appreciated because it means that when you're driving within the city, it is a lot less cumbersome because you don't have to take your foot off the accelerator pedal and go on the brake pedal. You can simply drive with one pedal only. Now, of course, if you do not like this behavior, you can simply shift down on the center console and it'll feel like everything's speeding up, and that's because regenerative braking is no longer active, and therefore if I were to lift off the accelerator pedal, I continually coast, and that can be handy, for example, if you're on the motorway. But I actually quite like B mode. Now, there is also the drive mode that will automatically go based on your setting that you select via the infotainment system, and therefore allows a degree of customization. So that's very much appreciated by the manufacturer because a lot of the alternatives out there don't provide any sort of customization whatsoever. Now, of course, you do have the ability of plugging it in, and via CCS port it'll take up to 205 kilowatts of input, therefore allowing you to go from 10 to 80% in half an hour. Now, there is an 11 kilowatt onboard charger that comes fitted as standard across the entire trim range, and therefore if you do have access to a faster wall box, you can go from 0 to 100% in 8.5 hours. It can actually get even faster because you can go for a 22 kilowatt onboard charger, which is fitted as standard on the M60 models or available as a £1,200 option in the eDrive 40 models. This effectively shaves down the time to 4 hours and 15 minutes. Unsurprisingly, it will take a lot longer if you're going to be connecting up to a regular 7 kilowatt wall box or plugging it in via regular 3-pin input. So aside from how it's on the road, what about when it comes to its interior? Well, I really do like its look. The quilted Veganza leatherette, which comes included for free, and the stitching work that BMW provide, but you can also go for a £2,100 option for real leather. There are also different trims that are available towards a dashboard that will cost you between £450 and £830, and there's also crystal controls which were fitted on this vehicle, and that will set you back an additional £600. So yes, indeed, there are a few different options that you can select. Now, in terms of the interaction bar, it's a light strip as such that stretches all the way around the cabin, and one that actually serves a purpose. Not only because you can interact with it by touching buttons which have got a haptic feedback, for example, if you want to initiate your dipped beam, but also if you have got any sort of safety concerns, be it if you're on the motorway and it has, let's say, an emergency brake, it will show up via the interaction bar. And also, for example, if you turn on the hazards, you'll see a red light flashing. This is also quite nice if you're going to be switching between the drive modes, for example, the sport, which is all red, and if you go for more of the eco modes, you've got a greeny blue color instead. So it's a nice little touch by the manufacturer, and it really does add to the overall class when you're sat within the vehicle. Now, in terms of practicality, you've got physical buttons that are found on the steering wheel, which therefore makes it very intuitive to use while you're on the move. And you've got a flurry of them that are found towards the center console, including the iDrive rotary dial, which is very useful if you do want to adjust certain settings, or indeed you're coming from an older generation BMW and that is what you've kind of got used to. However, it is a shame that all physical climate controls have been eradicated and they've moved over to the infotainment system. Thankfully over here, the curved 14.9-inch display is super responsive and is slightly angled towards you, the driver, and therefore makes it very intuitive to use. And once you do get your head around the flurry of options and the sub-menu systems that BMW provide, you'll actually find that the system itself is ultra responsive and very vivid. I've got no complaints whatsoever. Furthermore, it integrates Android Auto and Apple CarPlay over a wired and wireless transmission, therefore making it very useful if you have got a modern-day smartphone. The same could be said towards the driver's display, as you've got a 12.3-inch fully digitalized display, which provides you all the key driving information and can be really customized. For example, you can show up an AR view, you can even look at the likes of your driver assistance systems, and better still, given that it does feed through turn-based navigation data from the likes of Android Auto and Apple CarPlay, it's even better. The same could be said about the head-up display, which further extends this and provides you even better safety while you're on the road, because it allows you to keep your eyes planted on them rather than having to glance down towards the center display or even the driver's display. It is worth noting, however, that the head-up display is only available within the technology pack, which will set you back an additional £2,000. Now, on the subject of technology, it actually perfectly brings me onto its audio system. And yes, for those people who are subscribed, you'll be aware that I do detailed audio reviews, and there's one that's found for the i5 up on your pop-up banner or down in the description below. Now here you'll also find a breakdown of the in-cabin measurements, and what I'll say in a nutshell is that the i5 Touring does a tremendous job at higher speeds. In fact, it's one of the quietest cabins that I've ever tested, a real testament given the overall size of the vehicle. Now, as for the audio system, you have got a 12-speaker Harman Kardon configuration that outputs 205 watts. It will certainly suffice for the vast majority of consumers. If, however, you want to up the ante and you're a budding audiophile, you might want to consider the £1,250 option for the Bowers & Wilkins system that outputs 655 watts instead. Note this is actually included as standard in the M60 xDrive. This actually does a really good job across the sound frequency range and indeed does provide a worthwhile upgrade. Although it is worth noting over here that in comparison to other Bowers & Wilkins systems that I've reviewed, such as the one in the BMW iX, the i7 and the Polestar 3, it doesn't quite compete. So next up we get onto storage, and at the front of the cabin you have got the glove box, which has been optimized for right-hand drive vehicles. Then towards the center console you have got two wireless charging bays, which have also got a non-slip material which prevents your phone from sliding from left and right, although it is a little bit tight for larger size smartphones, but nonetheless wasn't an issue in my case. And then further down you've got two cup holders which reside next to two USB Type-C ports, one of which can be used to connect up to the infotainment system. And then further down you've got a nice little area that has got that bifolding design underneath the center armrest, and here you'll also find a 12-volt socket which can be handy for providing additional charge. Now, in terms of the door bins, the front two are large enough to accommodate a reusable 500ml bottle alongside some small to medium-sized valuables, and the rear two are unsurprisingly a little bit more limited. It is a shame, however, that all the door bins have not been lined in any sort of fabric or non-slip material, and therefore if you've got any sort of loose change or keys, they'll be heard rattling about. Now, as for the rear of the cabin, you've got a small little area that is just found by the rear portion of the center console, where you'll also find some USB Type-C ports, and you've also got a pull-down armrest compartment which reveals two cup holders. Now, of course, when it comes to storage, we have to talk about its boot, because this is arguably the key selling point of getting an estate, and the i5 Touring certainly doesn't disappoint. You've got a whopping 570 litres to play around with, or 1,700 litres if you drop down the seats. Better still, it's also very practical. You've got 40-20-40 rear split folding seats, which are also electronically released from the rear of the vehicle, making it even easier to access. You've got a small little underfloor compartment which will suffice for taking your charging cables, a hatchback design with an electric tailgate that comes fitted as standard, a flat loading bay, and also an adjustable and removable boot load cover. It would have been nice, however, if this boot load cover could have fit in the underfloor compartment, but given the amount of space you've got to play around with, it's no real issue. Similarly, there is no front compartment either, in other words, a storage compartment at the front of the vehicle, but again, given the amount of space you've got within the boot, it really isn't something to worry about. Now, equally is the overall seating comfort, and given its estate, it's almost no surprise to learn that headroom and legroom at the rear of the cabin are absolutely excellent. I had no issues whatsoever as someone who's just under 6 foot. Although it is disappointing to see a transmission tunnel, given this is a vehicle that is also shared with the regular 5 Series, and therefore means that your rear middle occupant will be left a little bit more uncomfortable. A shame, because an electric vehicle doesn't require a transmission tunnel because of how it operates, and therefore would have been nice to see BMW actually optimizing the rear footwell design. Nonetheless, the seats themselves are also accommodating and soft, and I had no sort of lower back pain, be it at the rear or at the front of the cabin. Now, speaking of which, the seats at the front are heated as standard, although if you want front lumbar support in the entry-level model, you'll have to spend an additional £275, which I do think is actually pretty ridiculous. But it actually goes even crazier than that. If you want a heated steering wheel, you'll have to splash out £1,200 on the comfort pack. That really should be included in a vehicle that costs over £70,000. Within the Comfort Pack Plus, which will set you back £4,600 in the eDrive 40 models, or £3,350 on the M60 models, you'll have heated rear seats as well, 4-zone climate control with a little small touchscreen at the rear of the cabin, and front comfort seats which are also ventilated. Again, I would really expect all of these to come fitted as standard, but unfortunately that's not the case. As for the panoramic roof, which was fitted on this press vehicle, it'll set you back an additional £1,600. Certainly something you might want to consider, as it draws in nice amounts of light within the cabin. Now, this actually perfectly brings me onto its exterior design, which I'm sure some people are going to dislike, but really in person, I really do like what BMW have done with the vehicle. And yes, even with that illuminated front size grille, which by the way is only present in the M Sport Pro and the M60 models, and it's called the Iconic Glow. It actually stands out in comparison to the regular models, so therefore is a little differentiator when you're on the road, or at least, of course, cruising around in the evening. Now, in terms of its design itself, it's actually pretty aggressive, as you might expect from a BMW. The bonnet is a little bit flared. You've got some really nice front splitter design and how it feeds seamlessly with the headlights. And then towards the side, you've got a really nice profile, specifically in the Estate, which has got that little bit of that elongated look. And then towards the rear, it looks pretty sporty thanks to an integrated spoiler and those small little tail lights. Everything really comes together and gives you a really nice look, at least in my opinion. But I'd be curious to hear your thoughts down in the comment section below. Now, in terms of the vehicle's towing capacity, it's rated at 750 kilograms for unbraked trailers, although this moves over to 1,500 kilograms for brake trailers, as on the eDrive 40 models, and on the M60 model, this moves up to a rating of 2,000 kilograms. As for the roof load capacity, it's rated at 100 kilograms. Next up, we get onto safety, and here the regular i5 and the 5 Series models were tested by Euro NCAP in 2023 and awarded a full 5 out of 5 stars, scoring 89% in adult occupancy, 85% in child occupancy, and 78% on their safety assist scores. One can only imagine that it would be slightly similar in the i5 Touring, but of course, given its estate, it's a slightly different vehicle. Now, when it comes to the driver assistance systems, you've got quite a few of them that come included as standard, such as cruise control, lane change warning, rear cross traffic alert, exit warning, and rear collision protection. If, however, you want to go the step further, you might want to consider the Tech Pack Plus for £3,300, because this incorporates Driving Assistant Professional, which gives you adaptive cruise control with stop and go technology, which actually does work a treat on the motorway, auto speed limit adjust, and enhanced safety with evasion engine assistant and crossing traffic warning, all of which are very much appreciated, although yet again one might have expected these to come fitted as standard in a vehicle that costs upwards of £70,000. Now, in terms of parking, it's actually pretty easy. Despite its elongated profile, you've got great visibility towards the front, side and rear. And yes, you do also have a wiper. A rear camera and sensors do come included as standard. However, if you want 360-degree cameras with a parking assistant and also a drive recorder, you'll have to go for the technology pack, which will set you back an additional £2,000. So with all that in mind, it brings us on to our verdict of the BMW i5 Touring, which is a supremely luxurious, comfortable, practical, accommodating and technologically advanced electric estate. Indeed, it really does tick a lot of boxes. However, the overall considerations to have are the fact that its electric range is a little bit lackluster, its performance isn't exactly up to scratch in comparison to what you'd expect for an electric vehicle, and of course its overall asking price, which starts from £70,000, is a little bit of a tough pill to swallow. Not only considering its main competitor from the likes of Audi, or of course if you start adding options you're going into Porsche Taycan territory. And of course if you do not want that sort of luxurious design or the comforts, then you might even want to consider the Peugeot E308 SW instead. Now we'd be curious to know which electric estate you would pick down in the comment section below, and how you feel the i5 Touring compares to not only its saloon sibling, but also the other electric vehicles out there. Now, if you have enjoyed this detailed independent review, definitely do consider dropping a like, subscribing and hitting that bell notification, all of which are greatly appreciated. As such, I've been Chris from TotallyEV, and I'll hopefully see you in the next one. Take care of yourselves, and goodbye.